Please take your seats. The session will begin in 5 minutes. Please take your seats. The session is about to begin. As a courtesy to our presenters, please silence all mobile devices. Thank you.
In 2015, World Vision and our partners made an audacious commitment to reach everyone, everywhere we work with clean water and help end the global water crisis. We are on track with this commitment, reaching 1 new person every 10 seconds with clean water. We had a game-changing idea. What if we brought one country forward and finished the job there in just 5 years? We picked Rwanda, where 1 million people needed clean water in the places we work. We have finished the job. We've exceeded our commitment and reached more than 1 million people with clean water.
Finish the job taught us very good lessons that together with other duty bearers like the government, we can actually make a difference and be more impactful.
World Vision is now focused on reaching 30 million more people with clean water by 2030, including finishing the job of ensuring clean water for everyone, everywhere we work in Zambia and Honduras. The Finish the Job effort by World Vision has raised more than $150 million from private donors. It's also resulted in significant contributions from governments in Honduras, Rwanda, and Zambia. We are on track to finish the job in both Honduras and Zambia. We are now making a new commitment. World Vision is committing to provide clean water access to 700,000 people across 23 districts in Ghana, including upgrading 500 schools and 200 healthcare facilities. We believe that with everyone doing their part, we can solve the global water crisis.
Please welcome to the stage Stephanie Street, Rob Guthrie, and Mayor Frank Scott Jr.
Good afternoon, everyone. Are you enjoying CGI thus far? Great. Well, today, on behalf of the Clinton Foundation, I'm thrilled to join our partners here to announce the Clinton Sustainable Energy District in downtown Little Rock, Arkansas, home of the Clinton Presidential Center. The Sustainable Energy District builds on the Clinton Foundation's commitment to responsible environmental stewardship. Through the construction of a new 5-megawatt solar array, we will more than offset all of the carbon emission output from operations of the expanded Clinton Center, which is now a 50-acre campus in downtown Little Rock, which includes the Clinton Foundation, the Clinton Presidential Library and Museum, the Clinton School of Public Service, and the former Heifer International headquarters. The solar array will be built on land leased from Cherokee Nation businesses, and we are extremely grateful to them for their critical support in this endeavor. In addition to delivering a positive environmental impact, the Sustainable Energy District will generate long-term utility cost savings and we believe serve as a scalable model for cities and community stakeholders across the country. The Clinton Foundation is not alone in this. The City of Little Rock will play a significant role. My longtime friend, Mayor Frank Scott Jr., the mayor of Little Rock, will discuss the city's plans to join the Energy District in just a moment. Our other essential partner in the creation of the Clinton Sustainable Energy District is Infra, and we are pleased to have Rob Guthrie, the CEO and the subject matter expert here, along with his terrific colleagues, to share more about the benefits of the district. Thank you. Rob.
Thank you, Stephanie. I want to first say what a personal thrill it is for me to be back here at CGI. I'll take a quick personal detour. I actually started my energy-related career at the Clinton Climate Initiative a number of years ago. Had the opportunity to work with a lot of fabulous people on a lot of very worthwhile initiatives, and it's great to be back, needless to say. I also want to say up front that I personally deserve very little credit for this initiative. In addition to the outstanding team at the foundation, And of course, the city and the mayor, Jordan Tinsley on our team, deserves the lion's share of the credit for the job he did in making this a reality. And Jordan's here with me today somewhere in the room. As Stephanie mentioned, the project has a twofold impact. So first of all, through a combination of energy efficiency and renewable energy improvements, the work that we're doing will reduce the foundation's GHG emissions annually to the tune of about 4,600 tons per year, and will deliver a cumulative $51 million of utility cost savings and new revenue over the course of the 30-year partnership. So there's first and foremost a pronounced financial and environmental benefit to the program. Second of all, and this is no small thing, and Stephanie alluded to this earlier, the project plants an important seed for a future sustainable energy district under which building owners and tenants in the city of Little Rock downtown can access thermal energy to heat and cool their buildings in a way that is maximally cost effective and maximally energy efficient. And we are very pleased to say that the city of Little Rock is poised to be one of the first major tenants in that system. And I will now turn it over to the Mayor, Frank Scott, to offer his and the city's perspective. Mayor.
Thank you, Rob and Stephanie. We are truly grateful to be here today. The city of Little Rock is a microcosm of the United States. It's both rural and urban at the same time. We are mission focused to become a transformative city. And when you understand that true transformation, to really be a catalyst for the New South. And in doing that, you have to have the critical component of sustainability. And in this announcement of the Clinton Sustainable Energy District, it is a true demonstration not only of fiscal and sustainable stewardship, but what I call a P4, public-private philanthropic partnerships. And these are the game-changing things that we as cities across this nation have to do to scale our opportunities together. And so we're grateful as a city that we also are building a 4.9 megawatt facility, a solar array, to ensure our goal of having 100% of renewable energy resources within city operations. And so our solar facility will do 70%. But this P4 with the Clinton Sustainable Energy District, it helps us close 30% more to get us to 100%. It closes that gap by leveraging our chilled water assets and monetizing this. And so to my fellow heads of states and mayors and governors, look for a P4, monetize it. It helps us all to become more innovative, efficient, effective, greener, brighter, and ultimately takes us all to true transformation. Thank you so much.
Please welcome to the stage Margaret Hoover and Mark Sussman.
Welcome. Welcome, Mark.
Thank you very much for having me.
Mark Sussman, CEO of the Gates Foundation. This past May, Bill shared a historic announcement about the future of the Gates Foundation. Over the next 20 years, the Gates Foundation will commit $200 billion to addressing the world's greatest inequities. That's double what you have spent in the past 25 years. And in December of 2045, the foundation will complete its work. That decision represents the largest philanthropic commitment in history. So, as the CEO of the Gates Foundation, and you move forward to spend down by 2045, how are you going to balance that urgency with spending down in the next 20 years and continuing to focus on what you have always focused on, which is catalyzing long-term sustainable systems change?
Well, really, it's our 25th birthday this year. So we were looking at how do we mark back, how do we look back and see where have we been most successful, and how have we spent that first $100 billion, and where have the biggest results been? And they were overwhelmingly in the global health space in particular, where we've seen over the last 2 decades a reduction in preventable child mortality, dropping from 10 million deaths a year in 2000 to fewer than 5 million deaths last year. We've seen a halving in infectious disease rates, in deaths from HIV, AIDS, tuberculosis, and malaria, which are the 3 biggest killers across the global south. And in those, what we looked and said, we are both confident that we can continue that progress, and we're so confident in the pipeline of innovations and new interventions we have to build on that, that we want to make sure we use the next 2 decades, that 2045 target, to really build towards a world that has no child dying of a preventable disease, if possible. That we want to really bring the big infectious diseases under control, that we think we can potentially end malaria and make HIV and TB fully manageable diseases for people across the world. And so that's the commitment and that's the vision we have for the next 2 decades.
Today, so this is a busy week. You have a busy 20 years ahead of you, but even today, you have announced a landmark deal with an Indian manufacturer, Hetero Labs, to bring the cost of the world's first twice-yearly injectable HIV prevention shot to, this is lenacapavir, down to roughly $40 per patient in low and middle income countries. Why does this matter? What will be its impact, and why now?
So this is an example of how innovation does transform how we deal with these deadly scourges like HIV. In the case of HIV, there's this new drug, lenacapavir, developed by Gilead in the US, which has been proven to be nearly 100% effective. It's an injection at preventing HIV, which is an extraordinary tool, but currently costs thousands of dollars per person a year here in the US. And so what we've worked on with the support of Gilead, working with, in this case, this company in India, and also in parallel with an initiative actually done through the support of CHAI, the Clinton Health Access Initiative, and Unitate and others who are doing a parallel set of investments. We want to invest in manufacturers that are going to bring down the cost of those interventions, as you say, down to $40 per person a year. You can completely prevent the HIV. And so that's an example. Prevention is not everything. We still need to work on treatment. We're still hoping to get ultimately to a cure. But it's a very concrete example of the kind of scientific pipeline that we're super excited about. But we know to actually allow it to reach the millions of people who need it, you need to make it affordable.
The Gates Foundation has always been very clear that private philanthropy cannot make up for a retreat in public funding. And yet, against the backdrop of sort of historic cuts and pulling back from the public sphere by governments around the world, how can specifically this drug help against the backdrop of really the pullbacks in PEPFAR funding that we've seen specifically with HIV?
Yeah, so you're right. Part of the amazing success story that I talked about over the last 2 decades in improvements in human health have been because of the generous support of many governments around the world, especially the United States government, which has been by far the largest supporter of global health through initiatives like the PEPFAR program, which works on HIV/AIDS. The US has historically been the largest funder of the Global Fund to fight AIDS, TB, and malaria. And it's going to be absolutely essential to maintain resources in these areas, even as many low and middle income countries in Africa and elsewhere are stepping up and spending more of their own scarce resources to meet these needs and challenges. And so one of the other announcements we've made this week is a historic $912 million contribution to the next replenishment of the Global Fund, because the Global Fund is exactly the vehicle that will be taking products like lenacapavir and making sure they reach the people who need them. And this crowds in public resources, philanthropic resources. It leverages the private sector in smart and effective ways. And absolutely, we are making the case very strongly. The reason we made the announcement is that we believe, the U.S. and other countries can and should still play a huge leadership role, and we're advocating that when the replenishment happens, the final replenishment numbers will happen in November. We hope the US government will remain a strong champion.
You say, the foundation says that you believe the next 20 years have the potential to be even more transformative than the last 25. This is not because you're spending $200 billion, $200 billion, so just let that number sink in. It's because the rate of change of technology and innovation is accelerated so dramatically. So explain what that will mean for reducing preventable childhood deaths. Vaccines are still saving millions of children around the world globally. What do you see as the next frontier for reducing child mortality, and particularly as climate change reshapes the global health challenges?
So there are multiple, with the successes we've had and that halving of preventable child mortality to under 5 million deaths a year, the single biggest reason for that has been vaccines. The Gavi Vaccine Alliance, which we helped found at the beginning of the century, has helped distribute and make sure that most vaccines are available cost-effectively to children all across the world, and we have global vaccination rates now of over 80%. That needs to absolutely continue, but of the remaining 5 million deaths, or 4.6 million deaths, over half of those happen in the first month of life. And so that actually requires a different set of interventions around maternal child care, around treatment of at-risk pregnancies, around nutrition for underweight infants. And so there we have a whole range of new innovations in the pipeline. Some of them are AI-enabled tools, where we now have a handheld tool which you can attach to a cell phone and actually acts as an ultrasound for a pregnant woman in a low-resource setting, and an AI algorithm will be able to analyze that ultrasound and give you results which are as accurate as a full ultrasound equipped in a high-income country hospital. And that allows you to treat at-risk. And then you have other AI-enabled tools around broader treatment and support to the primary healthcare worker, which we're pioneering at the moment in a number of countries. And then there's the innovation pipeline of new resources like vaccines. So we actually are currently spending over $500 million on a phase 3 trial, which is the last phase for a new tuberculosis vaccine. Tuberculosis is the disease that still kills more people, infectious disease, than any other. It's 1.6 million people a year, and it has a huge disease burden across large parts of the global south. And if we're successful, that would be the first new vaccine in over a century. So those are kind of examples you can get, whether it's on diagnostics, whether it's treatments, whether it's new tools. You know, there's a whole array of innovations that make us confident, as you say, we can, what we like to say, bend the curve, that the past is not reflective of the future, and we can accelerate it, but it does need resources. In the end, innovations, if they're going to reach the people who need them most, they need to be funded.
Infectious disease, maternal health, and then economic prosperity are the 3 pillars of the Gates Foundation. You've talked a little bit about maternal health. You've talked about infectious disease. Where is your focus over the next 20 years on accelerating economic opportunity around the world?
So, well, actually, our biggest area of focus in the United States is in education, because we think that is the primary engine of economic opportunity here, especially for low-income students who tend to be most at risk of not being able to graduate from high school or get a strong college education. And there we have, again, I want to oversell the AI revolution. I know it gets overhyped in lots of settings, but we do have some very concrete models and interventions now around curriculum reform, around support to teachers training, around tracking for students, especially with regards to math curriculum, which is actually the best predictor of how and when people will get through school and into college. And so that's a major area of focus here in the US. And then globally, our biggest area of investment is in agricultural development. That still 75% of the world's very poorest people, the people who live on $2 a day or less, are rural poor, who largely depend on small-scale family farms for both nutrition and income. And there again, there's a very exciting new tools, even notwithstanding the challenges of climate change, which are making it much more difficult, where you can get essentially things like drought-resilient chickens is a tool that we've massively invested in. It's called dual-purpose poultry. But essentially, it's chickens that both produce meat and eggs and are much more likely to survive drought conditions. And we have an initiative which is now across multiple countries in Africa, Ethiopia, Nigeria, Kenya, many others, where it actually supports almost overwhelmingly women farmers. It turns out men don't really like farming chickens. But it provides income, it provides nutrition, it's self-generating. Those are the kind of examples of why we see it's economic opportunity that then not only provides resources for the woman and family, but allows her to invest. And we know women are much more likely to invest in the future of their own children, making sure their kids go to school. So those are two concrete examples.
We were talking a little backstage about the decision to spend down by 2045. Give us a little texture on the backstory.
So the real backstory is about impact, and we always talk about impact as it measured not in terms of the dollars out the door. So while it's easy to focus on big numbers, 100 billion spent, 200 billion to go, for us the true measure of impact is we go lives saved and opportunities provided for the poorest and most vulnerable. And even before the current political and economic headwinds we're facing in terms of broader support for global health and development from the governments that have traditionally supported it, we felt very strongly that the way to maximize that impact was by betting now, to maximize and essentially spend all of Bill Gates' remaining resources. He's committed the entirety of his fortune to the foundation over the next 2 decades. And that is because we do believe it really is a plausible plan. It's not just a pipe dream that says we can be a world where we've more than halved child mortality again, and that we've eradicated some of the deadliest infectious diseases in history and brought them under control, because we hope and believe that in 2045, many of those problems will have been taken care of broadly for the next generation. There won't need to be a new fight against polio, because polio will be gone from the planet. That is our aspiration, and that's why that deadline and doubling down and maximizing the resources we spend now was a decision we were very proud to make.
Mark Sussman, thank you for joining us. Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
All right, our next conversation is going to convene 3 visionary leaders, all who are interested in innovative approaches to philanthropy by using effective storytelling to drive resources to worthy causes. Please welcome Abigail Disney, filmmaker, writer, philanthropist, and activist, Darren Walker from the Ford Foundation, and Maribel Perez Wadsworth, Knight Foundation CEO and President. Please join me. Welcome. My notes say that I have to start with you, Maribel, but I can't not, in this room, at this moment, start with Darren Walker. Because as many of you know, Darren is just at the wrapping up his very long and very storied, not very long, 12 years, that's like drop in the bucket, tenure at the Ford Foundation, and has just published a book, The Idea of America. I was flipping through it last night knowing that I was going to get to talk to you, and couldn't help but think about your legacy at the Ford Foundation in the context of storytelling, and read a quote from Martin Luther King Jr., which you cited in your acceptance of your appointment of the president of the Ford Foundation, where Martin Luther King Jr. said, "Philanthropy is commendable, but it must not cause the philanthropist to overlook the circumstances of economic injustice which make philanthropy necessary." So I wonder, as you look back at your legacy over the last 12 years at the Ford Foundation, one that has been marked by prioritizing justice and equity, how do you think about how you've empowered communities to tell their own stories and your time there?
Well, thank you. It's a huge honor to be on this stage with 3 amazing sheroes of mine, and to be in the company of all of you. Martin Luther King's quote was my touchstone because I came into philanthropy at the Rockefeller Foundation, where we read JDR's essays and we read Carnegie's Gospel of Wealth, which talked about charity. He talked about why, as a man of faith, he was giving away his money, and he popularized notions. In fact, Carnegie was the first to say it was important for wealthy men to give back. I was inspired by Dr. King's words because the story he was telling about philanthropy was a different story. He was saying charity, generosity is not enough. That philanthropy should also be about dignity and justice. And so that was my story as I thought about a moment of starting on my journey as president. And from that came my book, my first book, From Generosity to Justice, which was a call to action for philanthropists to actually think of themselves more as my philanthropic hero, Julius Rosenwald, did, who, in my view, was the first social justice philanthropist, and also, in some ways, erased from the history of philanthropy as we understand it. So storytelling is important because we hope that people will, through the ideas that Dr. King established about philanthropy, become more humble and listen to the very communities we claim to want to help. And finally, that we interrogate our own complicity in the very problems we say we want to solve.
Maribel, of course, storytelling is at the heart of the Knight Foundation's story. I mean, you're active in the 26 communities in which the Knight brothers owned newspapers and publications and told the stories of those communities. And you and Darren, the Ford Foundation and the Knight Foundation, as well as many other foundations, have joined together in a project recently to double down on storytelling by helping to bridge a funding gap to public media. You started with a commitment of $37 million, but I think you're up to $50 million now, according to the New York Times.
We are, absolutely.
So
just hitting the 50 million mark.
50 million, you have 100 million total? You're at 50 million, and that's for this year. And I think there's a goal, if I read between the lines in the New York Times, to maybe do that again next year. But the point is, this is a bridge for storytelling in local communities to bridge the gap in public media. So why was that important investment for you?
Well, I mean, the storytelling is certainly important, but let's not forget what public media represents to so many communities across this country that really have no other reliable source of news and information about their own communities, access to emergency alerts that potentially save lives. You know, it's easy to think in this increasingly modern tech-enabled world that, you know, you can just have digital access, but the truth is that broadband access is still unreliable in huge parts of the country. So finding a way to stabilize and keep these stations across many parts of rural America, our tribal reservations, et cetera, continuing to provide that vital information in their communities is absolutely critical, even as we seek ways to transform the overall system for sustainability in the long term.
And I think kudos to Maribel for understanding that we, philanthropy, have to be organized. Yeah. Because often we think we can do it on our own. And we say, we're going to go out and solve this. And the great thing about what Maribel did, it was reaching out to everyone and saying, none of us, including the Knight Foundation, is going to solve this alone. So hey, philanthropy, get your act together and try to figure this out collectively, working in partnership with PBS, NPR, CPB, all of the independents, the rural station networks, the native station networks, because only by looking at this comprehensively, which is what the fund she designed is doing, can we solve this huge challenge.
And we did it together, and we also showed that we could do it with agility. It doesn't have to take especially long to come together and do something important and meaningful.
But it does.
No.
Often in philanthropy.
We're going to fix that.
Well, and which brings me to Abigail, because Abigail, you first came to the Clinton Global Initiative 20 years ago when these convenings started, and over time, you've been critical of big philanthropy, so to speak. You are outspoken about the limitations of philanthropy, some of the contradictions that you see. So, how do you hope to see the future of philanthropic giving modernized, adapted for this moment?
Well, I'm not so sure this is a moment, first of all. I think this is a new time. And so this is a future we need to be talking about. And I'm not sure anything we've been relying on up until this point is necessarily applicable going forward. One thing that I have always had resistance to about the bigger philanthropies has been their inability to reach all the way to the ground with their funding. And that sounds clumsy and not real, but the metaphor I can think of is like there are cracks in the canyon, and some of them are very narrow, and we have fat fingers, and we need the people with the tiny skinny fingers to get into the narrow cracks. And there's not a lot of faith and not a lot of trust among the big philanthropists for the people at the ground level who are doing the hard work of getting through life every day. And now that resistance to funding that population of teeny tiny little grants is kind of biting us because we don't cooperate nearly enough. We don't form coalitions. And we have tended to fund programs, not movements. We have tended to fund institutions, not people. And the primary barrier to, or one of the worst things we're facing here in this political moment we're living in, and I don't care who you are on the political spectrum, there is mistrust, there is fury, there is anger, and we should all be very alarmed. And I go around with big philanthropy these days, I don't see any alarm. And I don't think that's because they're not alarmed. I think that's because they're afraid. Everybody's afraid. And my experience is, as strange and counterintuitive as it may be, the closer you get to the wealth and the power, the more fear you find, not less. People are afraid of what all they have to lose and won't act. So what I am worried about going forward is we still have, last decade's attorneys advising us on what's okay and what's not okay. But we've always known that there's a lot more latitude in what we can do as funders. There's tons you can do with 501c3s to build movements, to build organizations. There's tons of work you can do through C4s. And there is a mountain of money hidden away in DAFs around the country that could be released very freely into organizing. So I think the movement going forward has to be around organizing, advocacy, and reaching into the teeny tiny cracks with our big fat fingers.
How do you respond, Maribel and Darren, to this notion that this isn't a moment? We're in a new era, and that philanthropy needs to adjust or to fundamentally change its posture to confront this new era?
Well, I think, and I go way back with Abby and our shared critique of large philanthropy. I do think that it's true that there's a significant lack of courage. But I would posit that in recent days, we've seen a mobilization of at least what the media has labeled the liberal philanthropies, the liberal foundations, to actually mobilize and sign on to public statements in opposition to some of the ideas that are being espoused about freedom of speech, philanthropic freedom, and have been quite vocal. Unite in Advance is the organization I'm speaking of, the network I'm speaking of. But I do think there is a growing willingness to lean in and to name what is happening. It certainly is not as widespread as it should be, but I think we're beginning to see the kind of mobilization. I think your point about organizations is a challenge. The Ford Foundation, if we were actually making grants to small organizations, would need to be a much larger organization, and no one, most notably me, thinks the Ford Foundation needs to be a larger organization. And so we have regranting and we have ways of working, but we have to also be honest and candid that it is hard to do that. And the gap between our progressive rhetoric, well, of course I want to fund more Black women, feminist, grassroots groups in Mississippi.
I've got like 6 I can point you to.
Yeah, and in fact, I know those states, and it is hard to do that grant making. And so the gap between our aspirations as progressives and to do the work and to say, you know what, if we actually want to do that kind of grant making, we're going to need to hire some new program officers. Because you just don't give money to groups that have $100,000 budgets and on any given day can, without a good lawyer, make a huge mistake that could come back and blow back in your face. And so managing that aspiration is a reality. And the last thing I will say is it is a new day, regrettably. And we are kidding ourselves if we think there will be more philanthropic capital. It is not going to proportionately grow for issues of justice. And so unless we in philanthropy are willing to admit and be honest and say there isn't enough money for all the NGOs that we want to fund to do that, this system needs to be better rationalized. Everybody, every interest, every identity can't have their own organization. And unless we are willing to be honest, and we aren't, in part, because we're afraid of the implications of doing that, it's very hard to imagine how we will prepare for this moment and how we will support those communities who need to be prepared for this moment.
I think I would, as a relative newcomer to the world of philanthropy,
by way of background, most of you probably know that Maribel Ran-Gannett, she came from media and journalism. So this is a pivot for you.
This is
to
a
totally
very
new
different
universe.
animal,
Yeah.
The world of philanthropy. And so I come at
Probably
it a
more
little bit
money in
differently.
philanthropy than in journalism, huh?
I'll just leave that there. So the Knight Foundation has all of 65 employees. We are a national funder. We do work in 26 cities. What I think it is true, the things that Darren is saying are hard things, but I think we could do a lot more in philanthropy to think about how we do our work in different ways. So for example, I spent the majority of my time not in my Miami office, but in community, working hand in hand with our partners, getting to know the people who are actually doing the work and creating the solutions. So it raises the confidence, right, when we're making our investments, sometimes in very small organizations, because I and my colleagues are in community all the time. And that proximity makes an enormous difference. It informs our work. It helps us to understand what the needs are, because if we're not doing work that's actually informed by the people, the organizations, the experts on the things that we care about, then we're not going to do it right. So I think that part of what we all need to do is to just get so much closer to the work.
One of the places recently you've been in Detroit, right? You announced a major investment in Detroit's arts and technology economy, civic infrastructure, public spaces in the city. Can you just talk briefly about the role that philanthropy is playing hand in hand with the private sector or private partnerships to drive sustained economic growth in Detroit?
You know, Detroit, and you have a lot to say to this topic too. You are a big partner in Detroit. But we just did announce a couple of weeks ago another $20 million in investment in Detroit. Detroit, in my view, is an exemplar in the magic that happens when people are in real partnership for a common purpose to advance our city. This is a city that is only about a decade removed from the largest municipal bankruptcy in this country, and today is flourishing. Downtown Detroit is back in many ways. The population in the city is on the rise again. You are seeing a revitalized riverfront. You are seeing more business. And how is this happening? It's happening because people who deeply care about Detroit are coming up with the big ideas. They're working in partnership with the business community. They're working in partnership with their civic leaders. The philanthropic community is aligned and working together. Most of the investments that we make in Detroit, we are one partner of a series of partners that are coming together and doing this. And so I think it is, and the public-private piece of this is really important. Our dollars help often to draw down additional public investment that makes all of this truly possible.
Abigail, I know that you have said we need to stop funding programs and start funding movements. As a documentary filmmaker, storytelling, movements need stories. They need narratives. How has storytelling helped you break through, sort of break out of the echo chambers and connect with the people you want to reach and the people who really care?
So I think I'm going to respectfully rebel against your question, if that's okay.
Yeah, you say whatever you want. We do have a First Amendment still.
Darren, I'm going to respectfully disagree with you for 1 minute. And we've known each other long enough, I can do that.
You can do that.
You're a shero.
But Maribel, we're fine. Did you know that nearly 10% of the American workforce is employed in a not-for-profit in some way? And think about who those people are exactly. I mean, pretty much every one of them has chosen a less high salary than they otherwise would have in the for-profit sector. Why? Because they see themselves as contributing to the collective good of society. It is scattershot and helter-skelter and disorganized as anything. But that's an enormous number of American citizens who probably agree on much more than they disagree on. And they've been segmented and scattered from each other, partly from the environment of scarcity. That's real. There isn't enough philanthropic money. It's a real environment of scarcity. But also partly because of the way we fund. We'll fund, we don't want to say no to 4 organizations, so we'll say yes to 4, but not these 3, but we'll give each one maybe half as much as they really need to do the work we're asking them to do. And then we're going to tell them to spend time measuring it and evaluating it. They need a file cabinet for that. Well, we're not going to give you the file cabinet. So that's how we've been operating for a really long time. And the other way we've been operating is by saying that there are problems that have been caused by free market economy, and we're going to ask you to try to come up with a free market solution to the very problem that the market created. So we've been looking for these silver bullets, and forcing our grantees to go jumping through these hoops of silver bullets when we all know that these things are intensely interwoven and interconnected and reliant on each other to cohere. Movement is a word that scares people, right? Because they're just imagining we're out on the sidewalk and waving our fists in the air, and there is some of that for sure, but we've had fascism in this country already once, and it was called the Jim Crow South. Hitler sent his people to the Jim Crow South to study their laws so he could bring them back to Germany. that was fascism for reals. That wasn't just some histrionic designation. And African American people, at the beginning with no help from outside, formed boycotts. And this was a movement that was a collective, organized, well-communicating, networked group of people who agreed on certain principles that they were going to advance even at the risk of their own lives and livelihoods. And once they'd gotten some currency and success, then Ford being one of the first foundations, then the foundations started to come in once they had established themselves. I am asking us to imagine if Martin Luther came to us today and said, it's going to take years, people will die, people will get beaten up, it will be wildly unpopular, you'll be called a communist. So give me $1 million. So we wouldn't do that. We wouldn't give them the money. So how many Martin Luther Kings have we missed? Because it didn't really, there wasn't enough evaluation, there wasn't, and I understand all the caution and care that goes into all of those requirements we put on people. But the most successful movement against fascism ever occurred in our backyard. And the people who orchestrated that movement are with us still, many of them. And we need to be looking into that, and we need to be supplying modern movements with what they had that they can get even better. We need to help them with communications, because somebody's going to say something and it's come back and haunt you. We need to train them in how to organize communities. Indivisible is an extraordinary organizing mechanism, just in terms of the way it operates. We should take everybody from Indivisible and send them around, teach the small organizations. We should stand up infrastructure that makes it easier for them to communicate and cooperate and coalesce. There's all kinds of stuff we can do. I think our lawyers are being too cautious with us. There's more that we can do than they are telling us. And if we, with the resources, are too afraid to act, who's going to have to bear that? I can't bear that idea. I can't. So we need to get past our personal fear. We need to understand that what's happening to somebody who gets conked on the head and, by a guy in a mask and a weapon and put into a van, God knows where, that's our problem. He's our problem. It's happening to me. And I think it's time. I'm saying very urgently it is time, and we need to step into the real urgency of this moment.
Maribel, Darren, Abigail, thank you for joining us. Up next, Michael Dowling. Thank you all. Slight change here. The final discussion in this session is going to convene not to just one leader, Michael Dowling, who is the CEO and president of Northwell Health. What's most interesting is, while he is focusing on storytelling, he's also focused on creative partnerships and bold solutions that drive results. Michael Dowling, please join me. It's just you and I. A little surprise. We thought we were going to have three of us, but
well, we'll make it work.
We're going to make it. We're going to all the more time to talk about Northwell. First of all, please tell us, for those in the room who are not aware of the scope of Northwell's work in the healthcare space, can you tell? You're the largest nonprofit healthcare provider in the state of New York, one of the 10th largest in the United States. Give us a sense of the scope of your work.
Yeah, we are the, as you said, we are the largest healthcare provider in New York. We have absolutely all services from birth to end of life. We are have about almost 105,000 employees. So we are the largest private employer in the state of New York. And we're the result of multiple mergers over the years. So we have all clinical services, as I said. It's not just about hospitals, which is a mistake that people make. The bulk of our business is not hospital business. The bulk of our business is primary care, ambulatory care, post-acute care. But we're also one of the largest academic teaching places in the United States. Actually, we're number 3 in the country. And we also have huge research. And we try to be very, very innovative and try to be creative, try to do things a little bit differently. I think when you're working in healthcare and you have the role as a healthcare leader, you have an obligation to go above and beyond what your normal role is. Because I define healthcare, and we may get to talk about this, very, very, very broadly. It is an awful lot more than just providing medical services, you know, what the typical hospital or doctors and nurses will do every day, which is absolutely fabulous, and they do wonderful work. But healthcare is affected by everything, so we have an obligation to be involved in things outside our normal, traditional comfort zone, to be making a change in the world around us, not only our local world, but regionally as well, and frankly overseas, because we also have activities overseas. So I would define us as being, you know, focused on broadly, on health broadly, being very innovative, being creative, not being afraid to take positions publicly, tackling issues that other people may want to stay away from, such as things we might want to talk about, like gun violence, children's education.
So let's just go there. I mean, where are some places that you have taken a stand that are, you know, maybe some of your peers in the field or in business would shy away from? What are you not afraid of putting your name behind?
Well, I think...
You just said gun violence.
Yeah, well, I'll come back to it. I think right now, I think there is a strong need for courage by healthcare leaders and for all leaders, because when you look at the world of healthcare, especially in the United States right now and what's happening, we're taking a giant leap backwards, and we've got to be actually moving the agenda forward. So on the gun violence issue, this is a public health issue, and I went public on this about 9 years ago in a big way, because guns are the leading cause of death for kids in the United States. And that's a statistic that everybody should be absolutely ashamed of. It distinguishes us in the world, actually. And so we go public saying it's a public health issue, and we should be doing something about it. Now, there's controversy around this. People were not happy. You know, you get lots of people saying a lot of bad things about you when you do this, and people saying, this is not your lane, stay away, do something else, go back to what you're normally doing, and you shouldn't be concerned about this. You know, cancer is the 3rd leading cause of death for kids. And every healthcare organization in the United States is every single day working to see how it expands cancer services, promotes cancer programs. All great, all should be done. But the #1 leading cause of that is guns. So you have to be involved in it. And I can say that as a result of getting involved and taking somewhat of a leadership role on it, I now have 70 CEOs from all over the United States involved with us as part of a CEO council on gun violence prevention and safety. And we're focusing on the prevention and the safety aspect of it, enhancing awareness, getting people to understand the unbelievable dynamic here. I mean, we see the results of it in our hospitals, in our trauma rooms, in our mental health facilities. In fact, right now, and it's been all over the newspapers, we have a child, a 13-year-old child in our hospital today who was shot in the head in Queens just a few days ago by another, apparently it appears like another young person. This is something we've got to change. This is not what we are. This is not what we should be known for. We are better than this. And healthcare leaders have to see this as a health issue. And I want to compliment all of the other CEOs, by the way, from every state, red states, blue states, it doesn't matter, they're all involved with us. We have a meeting coming up this coming week, who are taking actions locally and advocating more globally about the fact that we have to do something like this. It's difficult in this environment. But when it's difficult, that's when good people have to speak up the most.
You have partnered with the Ad Council and launched a national gun violence campaign.
Right, the Ad Council, a wonderful organization that does spectacular work. You've seen them over the years advocating for drug-free America and all of this. We have a relationship with them. That's one of the partnerships we have. They're working with us now over the next couple of years. We've raised money from many of these healthcare organizations and others to launch a national campaign, which they will be leading, to educate the public on the fact that there are things we can agree on. The tagline is, agree to agree. Let's agree to agree that gun violence and guns being the leading cause of death for kids is not something we should tolerate. It's not who we are. And we have wonderful people, many of them are in the room, that are working on this issue with us. We have a gun violence prevention and safety initiative inside the organization. We have an entity that we created way back 9 years ago to promote this issue. And we have other organizations across the country now doing the very same thing.
You said at the beginning, healthcare isn't just about hospitals and healthcare delivery, right? It's an ecosystem. But you said one of the things that's missing is courage.
Yes.
Where else is courage missing in healthcare writ large?
Well, I think a new issue that I am very concerned about, that was going to take courage, is the ill health effects of social media. Every conference I go to, and I have all respect for people in the technology world. Technology is going to do wonderful things, has wonderful potential, can change a lot of things for the better. But we have to admit that the addiction to social media has a downside that is pretty dramatic. We're seeing a dramatic escalation and an acceleration in suicide, anxiety, and depression among young people. I'll give you an example. I visited one of our own facilities in Westchester County 2 weeks ago. It's a new program, mental health program that we opened up. And I walk into the office, and when I went inside the door, I saw 5, 6, and 7-year-old kids. And my first reaction was, well, they're here with older siblings or with their parents. Now, those are the ones getting treated. And I sat with the psychiatrist for quite a while, and I said, please explain to me what's going on here. And he said, the common denominator among all these kids as he's treating them is the addiction to social media. They need instant gratification, and it is very, very dangerous. So I think that this is another big public health issue, that people in the tech world should have courage now to stand up and say, we have a wonderful product, wonderful products. They will do dramatic things for us in the future, but let's worry about what the effect is negatively on kids. Because at the end of the day, when you ask yourself the question, what is the legacy you leave behind? The legacy you leave behind is the world you leave for your kids. And you want your kids in the future to be saying something about you. What did you do when you were here? And they don't want you to just exist. They want you to do something to make their lives better. And I think that we have an obligation here. The other area is on education, where I think we need courage to change the way we educate kids.
How so?
Well, I'll give you an example. We just opened up the Northwell High School of Health Sciences 3 weeks ago.
How many students?
230 students.
And where is it located?
It's in Woodside, Queens. It's a partnership with the City of New York. And I want to compliment the leadership of the Education Department in the city for working with us on this. Michael Bloomberg was also the initiator of this by putting out a challenge grant to do something different about what we do with children and with kids' education. So this school, and you may want to ask, and some people ask, what is a healthcare organization doing in working with a public school? Well,
creating your next set of employees?
Well, that's part of it. But my view is, if you provide a good education to a child from a disadvantaged community, let's say, or a disadvantaged family, and I came out of a disadvantaged family myself, so I can talk about this, and you do something for that child and that kid, you're improving their health. You give them an opportunity to see what's possible, you're improving their health. You're improving the family's health. So this school, the curriculum is being modified, has been modified to deal with pre-nursing, health administration, mental health, and medical assistance. So these students being helped by mentors and coaches from Northwell, as well as the teachers on the school. All of these kids will get their minds will be opened up to the possibilities for healthcare careers, and then we will provide internships and apprenticeship for them all. I think we need more of this kind of work so that we give the people the opportunity to see what's possible and provide better careers, have an apprenticeship type program, and so that there's a combination between academic learning and learning by doing, which is why you always learn more by doing than you just do by studying.
So this is a strategic partnership between Northwell, I know, right? That was a strategic partnership between the Department of Education here in New York City and Northwell. what other strategic partnerships? I mean, this is one of the things that has sort of been a cornerstone of your approach, as I understand it, to better health comes writ large.
Well, there are multitudes. I mean, let me mention one other, and I think this is something that is very badly needed. We need to educate, they talk about storytelling, because many of the previous panels talked about storytelling.
That is the common theme here.
It's a common theme. Storytelling is very, very, very important. What happens inside healthcare organizations and hospitals and ambulatory sites on a daily basis is absolutely extraordinary. For those of us on the inside who get to see it every day, we see miracles happening. It's absolutely unbelievable. I recall seeing the dramatic, extraordinary work that was done all during COVID. So what we've done a partnership with Netflix. So Netflix has been in and has done 2 shows. One is called Lennox Hill, and the other one is Emergency NYC. And these are stories about what actually goes on inside the healthcare organization, and they've been turned into major documentaries, about 12 episodes in each. They have been some of the most watched Netflix shows. And the other one that we did, one of the first ones, was during COVID. Since nobody on the outside was inside the hospitals during COVID, the parents couldn't come in, families couldn't come in, visitors couldn't come in. You had very, very sick people, and you had staff. We allowed a documentary film crew into one of our major tertiary campuses for 5 months during the height of COVID. They filmed everything on the floors of that hospital for 5 months. They did 850 hours of film. They turned it into 1 hour and 50 minutes of a documentary, and this is something everybody should see. It's called First Wave. It has won 3 Emmys. But what you see the dramatic innovations, creativity, compassion, dedication, and brilliance of staff. Your family members who are in the healthcare business, the family members you know in your community, what is being done inside is absolutely extraordinary. That storytelling is very, very important. We've got to, wherever there might be a dark space, we throw light on it, and we let the public understand what really, really goes on. We just did another one last year, HBO. We have a relationship with HBO.
Yeah.
Right?
On mental health, the One South
on
documentary.
Mental health. Yeah. I mentioned earlier about suicide prevention and anxiety. We have a major program because we have a relationship with about 100 colleges. And we have a program as part of our mental health facility, and it's called One South. The show is One South. But it's a program focused on how to prevent college kids from committing suicide. Now, I've been in the business a long time. I've never had to be engaged in these kinds of things in any major way in the past. So something is happening that is not right. And something is happening that requires the commitment of everybody to focus on. So we have a major program. HBO did a 2-hour documentary on this called One South, what we're doing to make sure that we can prevent college kids from committing suicide. Pretty extraordinary. Extraordinary work being done by extraordinary people. And fortunately, the colleges are very helpful here because they really send those students to us when they see a problem emanating.
Talk about the role of corporate philanthropy and the private sector in driving health outcomes.
Well, it's all in the context of partnerships. I mean, private philanthropy, corporate philanthropy is very, very important. I mean, we work with this all the time. I mean, I give you an example. I'm raising money right now and have had some private donors, substantial donors that have contributed a substantial amount of money for us to be able to build a facility to take care of adolescent mental health, but also to incorporate that mental health service as part of the children's hospital so we don't stigmatize mental health. That would not be possible to do unless we had corporate and individuals, donors and supporters. It is unbelievably important. This is why you see if you go to any museum, any college, any healthcare facility, you see people's names up on the buildings all over the place. What is that? That's corporate philanthropy. That's private philanthropy. So much of those things would not occur if it wasn't for the generosity of people like this. So these are great partnerships. And it also allows you to be creative. It allows you, when you work with a good donor that has very interesting ideas, you can do something a little bit differently. So very, 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 very important. And every organization is involved with it. And I think more and more of it is necessary, especially now because of the world that we live in at the moment.
You are approaching the end of your tenure at the...
Oh, I thought you were saying approaching the end.
Not
I
the
thought
end.
you
We presume you'll have another chapter because it's all about health outcomes. No, but this, you've been at Northwell Health for some time. You are at the end of your tenure there. As you move forward to the next chapter, what gives you hope for what's next in healthcare?
In healthcare?
And against the backdrop of storytelling and these partnerships and the landscape.
I've been with the organization 30 years. I've been there since the beginning. I've been CEO 23 years. I'm stepping down actually next Wednesday. Will be my last day as CEO. The person who's replacing me, Dr. John D'Angelo, is actually sitting over there. But I'm staying in the organization for another 2 years as CEO emeritus.
Nobody wants the CEO hanging around.
And I've already emptied out my office. I've already moving to a new location. I won't show up in the main office. I'm going to be a very, very good citizen. But
you heard it here first.
But I see, despite all of the bad stuff that is happening in Washington and the pulling back of United States leadership in science and public health, which, by the way, we should worry about. I mean, it's a giant step backwards. When you assault trust in science, you are creating an environment where our future populations will not benefit from those things that we've benefited from because of the investment in science and research over the last 50 years. Many people in the room are healthier today because of the investments in science over the last 50 years. You eliminate that, you assault that, you destroy trust on it, you talk about fake stuff and falsehoods, and our future generations will not benefit the way we benefit. That's the danger. These are long-term effects. They're not temporary effects. So going forward, I think that we need, again, to broaden the definition, everything we do, how the values that we promote, an issue that I'm very, very strong on. It's all about values. What do you believe in? You know, you gotta promote values of decency and respect and integrity and trust and truth and kindness. That's what builds good communities. That's what builds good families. That's what builds good organizations. That's what promotes health. When you promote grievance and hate and contempt for people who disagree with you and disunity, that promotes ill health. So public policy also is either promotes health or doesn't promote health. How we talk about with one another, how we discuss things together, how we can have conscious, very practical discussions and substantive discussions, all promotes health. I hope to be involved more and more to try to do something more in the mental health area. It's a very major concern of mine. I'm going to stay involved with the gun violence issue. I hope to take on the issue of the ill effects of social media, because I think our kids, we have to protect the future of our kids. While we optimize the benefits of technology, we got to worry about the downside. The benefits we talk about, the downsides we have to talk about.
Michael Dowling.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
This session has now concluded. Please make your way to breakout sessions beginning at 1:30 p.m. This session has now concluded. Please make your way to breakout sessions beginning at 1:30 p.m.